Hi and welcome to The Late Show. My name is Birgit Whelan and it's lovely to be with you for the program this evening. I'm standing in for Howard for the reason that we have a very special guest visiting the UK at the moment. So we're broadcasting out of our London studio, and our special guest serves as the director, the president and the chairman of the Oasis of Hope health group based in Mexico and in the United States. He is a distinguished oncologist and surgeon who integrates both conventional and alternative cancer therapies whilst also caring for the emotional and spiritual well-being of his patients. He's written extensively in the area of cancer and integrative therapy. 15 books he's authored and co-authored, so it's a great pleasure to welcome to the program this evening Dr. Francisco Contreras. Dr. Contreras, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Birgit. It's actually my honor to be here with you tonight. Thank you.
It's so wonderful. And I was just talking to you before the program started, Dr. Contreras, because we've mentioned on our social media about you appearing on the program this evening, and we've had such an amazing response, such interest and support from the viewers, because I think that obviously this is a topic, this whole area of cancer, that affects so many people's lives. So it's just really wonderful that you could be here to share your experience and expertise with us.
Yes, and basically my message is a message of hope. People hear the word cancer, they don't want to even repeat it. They call it the C word and all of these things, because the impression from everybody is that cancer is a death sentence. And I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be so, that you can beat cancer, you can live with cancer for many, many years with very good quality of life. So there's a number of options that you have when you have been diagnosed with cancer.
I just absolutely love the way that you're starting off on that basis of hope, because I think it is just so important to communicate that. And as we go through the program, it'll be interesting to pick you up on that, because I know that even for those who have survived cancer, that there's a very real fear of recurrence, which is something that you see in your treatment centres and hospitals. So it would be great to come back to that point.
Definitely.
But just to consider this statistically, because in the UK, 1 in 3 people's lives, or 1 in 3 people will be diagnosed with cancer at some stage during their lifetime, which is a huge proportion. I mean, this is extremely pervasive. So for many of the people watching, if not all of us, our lives have been impacted in some way by this disease. So,
and 1 out of every 4 people already has a loved one with cancer. So our contact with cancer is very, very high, and it's something that we don't want to see, and thus we are uninformed or misinformed, which is worse. And many times we make the wrong decisions because we perish for lack of knowledge.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, it would be great to consider this topic from all angles. And I just wanted to make you aware that if you have any questions for Dr. Contreras, please do email and text us. The details are coming up at the bottom of the screen. So I'll be receiving your questions throughout the program. And we're wanting to look at this in terms of causes, in terms of prevention, if there has been a diagnosis, treatment options, both conventional and alternative, and also considering the role that lifestyle factors such as nutrition and exercise play, and also the emotional and spiritual aspects of a diagnosis. And also, if you have been diagnosed, the possibility of living a long life and a strong life with cancer, and even being cancer-free. So we're wanting to cover all of these areas. So do email in with any questions that you have. It would be really lovely to hear from you. So Dr. Contreras, I wonder if I can start off by asking you about the Oasis of Hope, because I know that last year the Oasis of Hope celebrated its 50-year anniversary from its founding in 1963. It was founded actually by your father, who is also a distinguished oncologist, Dr. Ernesto Contreras. And I wonder if you would just share with us his vision, because he was actually a bit of a pioneer. So his vision and the history and the work of Oasis of Hope.
The origin of the Oasis of Hope is very peculiar, because my father was the director of a major oncological center in Mexico City. And when he celebrated his 25th wedding anniversary, he went on a tour around the world and visited Pergamum. And a guide told him, would you like to visit the first hospital ever in the history of humanity? And of course my father said yes, and he took him to Asclepion temple. Asclepion is the god of medicine in the Greek mythology. And what was interesting, my father told me later, is that in this temple, people would go to the temple and first be evaluated spiritually.
Wow.
Which was astonishing for my father. Then from after being evaluated spiritually, then they would start treatment. Then they would be evaluated physically and actually start treatment.
Wow.
And then they had a tremendous amount of emotional support and hope. And they would take the patients through a tunnel. And this tunnel had holes in it. And unbeknownst to the patient that was walking in the tunnel, people on top of the tunnel were telling them, "You're going to be healed."
Wow.
And you're going to be actually brainwashing them. And the people thought that it was the gods. They didn't know that it was other persons. And the results that they had were amazing. And so my father said, it's like a veil came down from my eyes. And I said, the reason why we're such a failure is because we're just viewing patients as mechanical entities, and we're the mechanics of their bodies, and we're not taking into account their emotional and spiritual needs.
Right.
So I'm going to go back and I'm going to change things. When he got back to the hospital, said what they were going to do, they kicked him out.
My
They
goodness.
thought that he went crazy. And they exiled him from Mexico City to Tijuana, a small, very small town at that time.
Right.
And so he said, if they're not going to allow me to do it in the social entity that are the government hospitals, the big hospitals, I'm going to do it on my own. And that's how the Oasis of Hope was started. And he started praying with the patients, encouraging the patients, giving hope to the patients. The first name of our hospital was the Good Samaritan. That's how my father named it. But a patient came from Italy very early when he started doing this. They had sent him home to die, came to my father. 5 years later, he was going to die in 3 months. 5 years later, he comes back with a present that we still have at the hospital, a statue of a girl with flowers. It's a beautiful statue. And he said, I want to give you this present because this is an Oasis of Hope.
Amazing.
And so from then on, our hospital was always, the Good Samaritan and Oasis of Hope. As the time went by, we were just known as the Oasis of Hope, and so all of the rest of the name fell apart, and so we are the Oasis of Hope, and so that's the origin of the Oasis of Hope.
It's so interesting because you've basically just described how it is, or the background to this idea of its total care, or sort of an integrative approach, which brings together both conventional and alternative therapies. So I wonder if you could just share a little bit more about that concept, that total care approach concept, and explain what that means.
Well, cancer is a very complicated disease, and that's the main reason why we can't find a way to actually cure cancer.
Right.
There's nothing in the horizon. I mean, we know a lot about cancer, but we have no clue on how to get rid of it. And thus, it's a foe that we need to approach in a multi-pronged manner. And so we will fight cancer from many points of view. And one of the most important factors on how to attack cancer is the powers that God has given us in our immune system, in our mind, in our physical ability, the actual fight that our body can put against it.
Right.
And so how can we then exploit, in a good sense of the word, these gifts that God has given us for the benefit of the patient? And so that instead of directly attacking the tumor, what we're doing at the Oasis of Hope is providing resources to our patients for them to be able to fight their cancer. Because there's no better machinery than what God has given us to heal ourselves. And in fact, we're healing ourselves constantly. We're regenerating. It's an amazing body that God created for us. And so we have that capability. And so then we provide resources. So we provide resources at the physical level with medications, with nutrients, with diet. We provide resources at the emotional level because functional emotions are going to make your immune system work better, and this is measurable. It's very scientific. But your emotions are going to be functional or dysfunctional based on your spiritual fortitude. And so if you have no spiritual fortitude, your emotions are all over the place.
It's really interesting to begin to get a sense of this chain, as you're saying, the condition of our spirits, our spiritual strength, and the way that actually influences our emotional well-being, and how our thoughts play such a critical role in our immunity, and whether our immunity functions well or is suppressed, and in effect how that will lead to our body's ability to resist the onset of cancer, is basically.
Exactly. And now we know, it took us more than 2,000 years of science for us to find out that if your immune system is working 100%, it is impossible for you to get cancer.
Wow.
Just impossible. So if you develop cancer, it's because your immune system failed you. Getting your immune system back in order will give you a much better chance to fight cancer or to control cancer.
And obviously, thinking about it from the point of view of prevention is better than cure, as the saying goes.
Much better.
It's really important to really grasp hold of this point about immunity, really from the beginning. I wonder if I could just ask you, it's probably a scientific question, but it's about cancer being a genetic disease, because I know in your book, and in fact, before we begin the discussion, I should perhaps mention that, because last year being the 50th anniversary, you co-authored a book to coincide with that anniversary.
Yes.
The book was written with your nephew, Daniel Kennedy, who has been a guest with us actually a few months ago. It was wonderful to interview him. Now, he is the CEO and Director of Counselling for the Oasis of Hope, a psycho-oncology counsellor, so he was very helpful in talking about the emotional and spiritual aspects with regard to treatment. So the two of you co-authored this book, 50 Critical Cancer Answers. During the program, your website details are going to come up, because I know the PDF version for this book is available on your website for people who would like to follow up on that. But the point is that we're going to be basing our discussion a lot on that book, and in that text, this comes back to my question about genes, because it describes cancer as a disease of the genes, or a genetic disease. And I wonder if we could just start with that, if you could explain what that means, and also what happens within the body that triggers the onset. We've talked about immunity, but what actually triggers the onset of this disease in the genes?
There are several ways to look at this, and there's no question that there's a major genetic component to cancer, but not in the sense that we inherit bad genes. Okay, we may, because of the aggression that we bring onto ourselves with a bad diet, not doing exercise, not resting enough, not getting enough sunshine. And here in England, that's a complicated thing. I've been here 3 days and have not seen the sun much, so it's complicated. But a lot of people believe, in many doctors and many scientists will tell, especially women, well, if your grandmother had cancer and your mother had cancer and an aunt of you had cancer, the possibility is that you inherited a bad gene and that you can have cancer. And this it is very far from the truth. As we don't inherit bad cancer genes, we activate our bad cancer genes. And so here in England, in 1995 and 1994, two major genes for cancer were discovered. The BRCA, or breast cancer gene number 1, and BRCA2. And so women that have these gene mutations are very susceptible to developing cancer. Between 60 to 80% of women that have these two mutations will develop breast cancer, and about 40% of them will develop ovarian cancer. So you say, well, then genes do play a major role. Well, 95% of the women that have cancer now in England do not have those mutations.
Wow. That's a really unusual point, because I mean, I'm learning a lot, because I know what you mean. There's this idea that there is this genetic predisposition, but actually what you're saying is that
very
even with
few
those
women
genes,
will have that, and not 100% of the women that have those genes will develop cancer. Okay, so between 40 and 20%. Now, women that have discovered those genes, if they change their lifestyle, then they have been able to avoid cancer of the breast. Now, if you think about it in large numbers, then you would say, well, the incidence of cancer in England is about 153 per every 100,000 population. And the incidence of cancer in China is 1 per 100,000 population. So then the Chinese don't have the gene, and the English women have the gene, unfortunately. Well, interestingly enough, when Chinese women migrate to England and start eating like the English women, in a matter of a few years, then they have the same incidence of cancer as the English women.
That's staggering.
So genes play a very minor role. So that's one of the questions that a lot of people have and that we address in the book, for women, not to be bogged down because, oh my God, I have this genetic predisposition, and then I cannot do anything about it because it's in my genes.
Yes.
And so they're defeated before they can start a fight.
Yeah. So really, actually, by emphasising this point, it's actually empowering people, because what we're actually realising is that it is a lot to do with choices. It's a lot to do with our lifestyle in terms of nutrition and exercise, and we can do something about that, which I'd like to pick up on with you. But just a question before we move on from this aspect of genes. Are there predictors? Are there... there was an aspect in your book which talked about there can be